Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will resume. We're going to come back into order. We now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Hice, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Herring, it seems the State Department initially requested the B-5 exemption. Is that correct?
Sir, I wasn't in position at the time they were doing all of that, so I'm not.
Is that your understanding?
I'm not sure which exemptions they claim. Talking about the redactions?
Right.
I'm not sure what the State Department asked for. Okay.
And it's my understanding that the FBI overruled that. Do you have any awareness of that decision?
We don't typically, we're the investigative agency. So when it comes to matters of classification, we typically defer to the owners of the information. So
okay, well, Ms. Frifield, let me go to you then. Why was State trying to use this extremely broad exemption?
I'm not responsible for FOIA redactions, so the FOIA process at all, so I'm so afraid I don't have an answer to that question.
So you're not familiar with the B-5 exemption?
I know what it is, but I'm not actively involved in the FOIA process in making redactions or anything, any aspect.
So you don't have any idea who made that decision?
FOIA is mostly done through our administrative bureau, so I would assume it would be someone in that bureau that would do it as the normal course of action in the FOIA process. As a normal course of action, given that exemption, would anyone outside of State Department have been consulted? We normally do consult in some cases for if there's interagency equities, and then they try to reach an agreement on what the classification level or redaction should be. So it would be your assumption then that probably there was some consultation. I don't know. You don't know that, but that would not be uncommon. It would somewhat, from your understanding, be something. From my limited understanding of the way the FOIA process works. That particular exemption is basic among at least many people known as a withhold because you want to withhold exemption. Have you heard that expression before? No, I have not. Okay, it's very, very broad, and it gives every appearance, at least, that there's a reason to try to hide. Let me try to hide information, and that's the frustrating point of all this. Let me ask this. What criteria is used, do you have any idea, when it comes to redacting information? For FOIA? Well, I would like to draw a distinction between FOIA and a request from Congress. FOIA is done by, through the FOIA process, as I just said, through the Administrative Bureau. And they have a series of very formal redactions which they make under the FOIA. So how does that differ from a request from Congress? We don't do that kind of redaction at all when it comes to Congress. Well, we're filled with redactions with what we have. Mr. Kadzik, let me ask you the same question. What is the difference between making decisions of redactions from a FOIA request versus Congress?
Well, I'm not an expert on FOIA requests and redactions with respect to FOIA, but we don't use the FOIA standard when we produce information to Congress. Typically, we provide more information, but we still protect our law enforcement and prosecutorial equities when we make information available, and we do it consistent with the Constitution and the statutes that apply.
All right, let me go back to Mr. Herring, because it seems to me like we're just going around in circles with all of this. The chairman asked you earlier what you believe Congress should not be allowed to see or have information, and basically you said it varies from case to case. That's a pretty broad difference. Does it vary depending on some cases, a high-profile individual?
No, sir. Let me try to answer it this way if I could. When the Bureau provided records to Congress, really, we think that the redactions were very light. We redacted primarily the personal identifiable information for some of the folks. And honestly, we do usually strive to protect information of a purely personal nature. And so, as far as
excuse me, I've just got the 20 seconds left, but there's a whole lot more than that that's been redacted. I mean, on page 48, for example, you redact Ms. Clinton's birthday. The very next sentence, 4 attorneys of hers are mentioned by name. A 5th one is redacted. That's not personal information. There are hundreds and hundreds of examples like this.
Certainly. I mean, I think a number of the folks mentioned in those documents are out there in the public in some form or fashion, and I don't think that there's any reason to, well,
If they're in the public, then why didn't we get it?
the ones that are in the public you did get. The ones that are not in the public are the ones that were redacted, sir.
So is the standard for Congress based upon what you would give the public?
No, sir.
Well, then we should receive that and much more information. I see my time has expired, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to continuing.